There we go. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Classic line. Right. Okie dokie. So thanks everyone for joining. As Becky said, this webinar, me and Alex are from Verge, so we're going to be touching on some of the techniques we use around data-driven research. We're going to talk a bit about the commercial application of those and just have a general chit chat really around how we're trying to push the boundaries with the work we do and how research can really help companies evolve and move on to that next step. Super quick, as Becky said, we're the insights hub of Lab Group. There's the agencies at the bottom of Lab Group. We use data, linguistics, cognitive science, all to kind of solve commercial and societal challenges. And that's really based on, data-driven insights, not hunches. So first of all, just to get a bit of a lay of the land, we wanted to talk about how research is kind of evolving. Typically, and in the past, we can think of it as kind of an inside out approach. So where maybe in small focus groups or more of a qualitative settings, the main aim is to excavate insights based on what a small subset of people are thinking. And as a result, we try and draw inferences from that to try and understand customers or topics or brands or anything really. But that's been the inside out approach, because we're trying to get what's going on inside people's heads and apply it to the wider world. The way I like to think about this is kind of the harpoon approach. However, no surprises really, it's moving towards this outside in approach where it can be thought of a bit like a trawler net. There's all this data online, in CRMs, everything. It's all out there. And what we can do is, the way research is evolving is by looking at this data and just extrapolating patterns to see what's happening. Rather than making inferences as such, we can just use the data to inform us on what's happening. And as a result, we can apply things like behavioral science, linguistics, and psychology to try and gain meaning from these patterns and question why they're appearing in the first place. So at Verge, we're kind of pushing this more trawler net approach. And why we do this, this is one of my favorite quotes really. People don't want to buy a 1/4 inch drill, they want a 1/4 inch hole. So the aim of this research and to look at how people communicate and how people behave is to really understand not the products they want, the features they desire. We're trying to get at what are their unmet needs, what are their frustrations, what are their pain points, what are their desires. Because once you know that, you can then sell them the sizzle, not the steak. You can really meet that need for them in the market. And that's where we work closely with the team at Reflect to build that into kind of particular campaigns to make sure we're hitting the right keywords and people there.
Cool, thanks, Max. So you might be wondering at this point, what does this actually look like? How do we do it? So in a nutshell, one of our main approaches is what we're referring to as comparative linguistic analysis. So what we tend to do is we use various tools such as web scrapers, API connections, and we use these things to go into online communities, whether that be forums, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook comments, basically any text on the internet, we can find a way of gathering that text. We then quantify this text. We look at word frequencies, probabilities of words, and we statistically analyze words, topics, phrases, grammar, sentiment across all these different data sets and start to build an image of how online communities, brands, trends are actually being portrayed. And the sort of theoretical background to this is really interesting from a linguistic point of view, coming from the linguist. It's that we don't really control everything we say. So when someone is maybe talking in an online community, they're at ease, they're talking naturally, and then there are small hidden patterns in a person's language, which we can statistically analyze. So just as a little example of what we've done with this before, we've done work trying to work with the UK Gambling Commission to reduce at-risk pathological gamblers, reduce the harm for them. So we went into online communities, self-help forums, and we actually found new and emerging unmet needs being raised by these gamblers and their friends and families in these communities. And we can do all of this without having to use, focus groups, without having to actually meet people in person. So we have a scalable quantitative solution that does give us that qualitative level insight. So once we've done that, we can start to really tailor solutions, whether that be policy recommendations, marketing solutions, branding, communication. We can do all of this based on the knowledge that we found how people genuinely feel and talk about things using this level of data.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alex. And I think, as you might question, well, is it really worth it? And I think one of the best benefits with looking at data online is that everyone loves a rant. Everyone loves to, put tweets out there, to write Trustpilot reviews. And what that means is the responses are often a lot more unfiltered and they're a lot more unaffected by biases. And what that actually leads is to higher validity of data. We're trying to get at how people really feel. And as a result, with the quantitative scale, that gives you that just extra level of confidence that the findings might be applicable to the real world and what's out there.
So another piece of work we did, and this is, I think, a really nice sort of marketing, branding, understanding of this, but it also sort of plays on that sociological aspect. We analyzed data set, again, gathered from online communities and, posts and tweets and things. And we analyzed data about vegan versus plant-based. And you, like me, may have thought, okay, vegan, plant-based, more of the same. I understand notionally what they're about. But actually, we found statistical evidence of different word frequencies in each data set. So you'll see here on the left, vegan, much more characterized by your, their, arguments like this. It's much more about an identity. The way vegans and vegan messaging is constructed online is much more of social identity, understanding interhuman connection, all these kind of things is much more of a calling. Whereas plant-based, we found 3.3 times more likely to mention the word transitioning. It's about that journey. 3.3 times more likely to mention protein. It's about the features. It's about, yeah, okay, plant-based is good. It might be for you, it might not. Here's why you might like it. Whereas that vegan is that social, cultural identity. So from a branding point of view, you might take this and go, okay, if we're plant-based, we might either want to be disruptive and go more with the sort of vegan identity-based messaging, or we might want to fit into that market a bit more subtly and adopt these processes. So we're able to give this level of insight based on all these niche little words and really tailor marketing communication accordingly.
Thanks, Alex. And just to note on this came from our More Than Meets the Eye report, which I think afterwards we'll share to all you attendees, so you can, if you want to, get a bit more of a deep dive on what we actually found. But I think to summarize, kind of you might be questioning, yeah, but how do you actually do this? What's the nitty gritty look like? What we did was mainly looked at sort of social media posts and tweets, and we look at ones which have the word vegan in or similar words relating to vegan. And then that's one data set, one source. And we have another source, which is all posts and tweets which have the word plant-based in. With these two sources, we can then analyze them, comparatively analyze the language, and that then reveals over-indexations or greater relative mentions of particular words. And that can really guide us, as Alex mentioned, on how people are talking, kind of the language of thought, new trends, new topics, emerging sentiment over time, in order to inform that later stage of marketing and strategy, really. So just a quick overview of some brands that are out there. We're seeing that these different vegan and plant-based brands are communicating varying signs and symbols known as sort of semiotics underlying this. So as we can see, the top left, the underlying semiotics and themes associated to kind of this indulgent, masculine and uncompromising nature. And a big reason for this driver really is that traditionally, if you go back sort of 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, the meat in a meal is often thought of as the centerpiece. You know, they have the Sunday roast and that's all around the meat there. So there's often this inclination that when there's no meat, you're missing out on that centerpiece. So a lot of these brands are like communicating more of these bigger semiotic symbols to show that actually it can be quite indulgent and uncompromising. As we can see on the bottom left, there's almost aligning with this kind of vegan identity, you know, we're all in this together theme that Alex touched on. There's this proud, vibrant and quite creative sort of designs there. Top right, we can see, again, it's disruptive, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, it's a bit adventurous. So there's this surprising, sort of almost rebellious nature quite associated with that kind of vegan aspect as well. And then on the bottom left, for more plant-based, we're seeing, as we saw with our research, there tends to be this trend to freshness and taste and sort of beautifully created lifestyle imagery, along with that transition element we were talking about. And really, we just wanted to show this because, you know, there's key underlying themes in the landscape which brands are communicating. And over time, it's likely, you know, with climate importance increasing and health benefits increasing, brands will need more and more research to understand what are those subtle things and cues people are talking about, and how, as a result, can we communicate that either visually or through strategy or through marketing.
Thanks, Max. Okay, so we have this data now and we understand our audience and we have a better understanding of the market given all this language data. But at this point, you might now want to tailor that even further. And what we are starting to develop here at Verge is actually a data-driven user personas method. So once we have all this knowledge, how can we take that further and create archetypes based on data rather than intuition, perhaps? You know, how can we give you guys and ourselves that extra bit of confidence in your personas, knowing that they are for a purpose at every stage of your user decision journey or your messaging or your marketing? Okay, so in a nutshell, what we do is to make these data-driven personas is we'll run a survey based on any demographic that we're working with. We'll run a survey and we will elicit behavioral, psychographic, and needs-based responses from users and different demographics in this survey. So, for example, we might be asking about how people interact with online shopping or fashion or even something like gambling. And what we can do is we can ask questions based on traits and habits, model these on a quantitative scale, and then actually using machine learning, we can take this messy data we have here in the top right and cluster that into salient clusters. So we might have 2, 3, 4, however many clusters. Now these clusters become statistically significant data points, which you can think of as a persona. So one cluster would be a persona. So we would have this green cluster here, blue cluster, and the red cluster. These were each representations of maybe thousands of users that are all statistically similar in terms of their behaviors. So what we've done is we've given that extra level of confidence to the personas process. Now, after we do this, we then go and add, you know, tailored marketing messages and communication messages on top of that. So we do blend the data with the more traditional marketing side of things, but we're always trying to reduce maybe a bit of bias in the process, spot opportunities that the human eye alone couldn't do. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there, and just to really hone in on the kind of how this is done and sort of all this metadata, because it looks quite complicated, and it is, but the general overview is with the survey we can ask all these different questions. So how likely are you to find yourself scrolling when shopping online, for example? All of these different questions relate to behavioral attributes or characteristics. And then what we do is we use maths and machine learning to take all of those different data points associated with these questions, and as Alex said, use the maths to cluster them and find actually this group of people, they like scrolling a lot, they like inspiration, and they hate pop-ups, for example. Whereas this other group, this other cluster, they have a different set of characteristics. So really, it's just adding that extra level of, as Alex said, confidence to personas, cluster personas, as it were.
Thanks, Max. So this is what it actually looks like in the end. As Max would have just said, this is on the left here, a visualization of a particular cluster, which could be several thousand users, all represented by similar data points, right? So this cluster, as we see here in this histogram, yeah, they like to filter. So they like to use filters really actively in their mobile shopping experience. They find themselves scrolling a lot, which would make sense given that they like filtering. So they probably have that need. It's probably a connection there. They do like speed. They're speedsters. So they want to get through that journey as efficiently, as quickly as possible. They don't want to fluff around with it. They'd also like to shop the look. Okay, so they might be scrolling a lot, but they might see a person, they might see a t-shirt on the model, but also want the shoes and the jeans on that model as well. So how can we tailor that experience to this particular person? So if you have some data on your users, you might see, okay, I find this user scrolling a lot. For every user that scrolls a lot, we should give them the availability to buy the whole outfit on the model they see, because we know that they shop the look. And you see here the fifth plot in this histogram, they are inspiration browsers. So again, they're actively looking on their mobile shopping fashion experience for inspiration. Oh, I might like this, I might like that. Can I shop the look and do this all in one embedded journey? So already we've started to build maybe a more reliable, efficient model of actual user behavior, and we can recommend product features, marketing, and communication a bit more effectively. On the flip side, we have what they don't like as well. So these people, they don't experience post-purchase regret, which is good. They're often pretty happy with their purchase. So we might not need to offer them the most efficient returns in this sense. They don't like to curate items. So that's in terms of wish listing things, mood board. They're not bothered about that because we know they like to go through things fast. They're scrollers, they're filterers, they are efficient. They don't have time to curate and mood board things. They're not omni-channel users. So in this case, these users were modeled only using their phones. So they're not using a desktop and a phone. They're probably just on their phone. So how can you tailor maybe your user interface to suit a mobile user, this user, better? They don't tend to have one goal, which also makes sense because they're scrollers. So they probably go into the journey thinking, okay, maybe I get this shirt, maybe I get the shoes. They like to browse and they like to see what's going on. And also they're not a fan of micro interactions, which in this case was when you may click on a photo and a little heart pops up. They don't want that. They don't need that. They want simplicity and ease in their journey. So we can use all of these features that are mathematically modeled to really tailor that experience just right. And just as a little addition here on the right, when we do these surveys, we also ask open text questions. But to save ourselves time and to give a bit more confidence, we use natural language processing, text analytics to quantify the most common keywords. So we might ask in this case, what is a frustration when shopping on your phone? And what we do is we remove a lot of the noise in these responses, we normalize them, and then we model all the frequencies. So we'll see here, in terms of frustration, you've got classic pop-up, size, slow website, but also we found, oh look, filtering was a really big frustration we found for people with online mobile shopping journeys, and we thought, hey, it's quite surprising. How can we make that filtering experience much more efficient? And this also, you'll see here in cluster 2, is our #1 feature for this cluster. So we've already found genuine pain points by using what is effectively simple statistics and frequencies to model all these things together.
Thanks, Alex. And really, why we go through this effort, you could do it many other ways, but we like to make things, a little bit more confident, have the robustness there, and then with that data, that's where we apply in the Verge team our knowledge of behavioral science, psychology, linguistics to try and go, what does this mean in the real world? How do we apply that to tailor marketing, to tailor strategy, to tailor anything we really want in order to create actionable recommendations. So on the next slide, Tom's just going to mention how we can actually prove some of these insights at that next stage, in case some of you are quite rightly questioning, oh yeah, but has it actually worked in the real world, and where do we go from that?
So thanks, Max. So yeah, absolutely. So very much, that's why I work at Reefer Digital, as Becky said before, but I work closely with Max and Alex several ways, particularly for our clients of working for paid media clients, for display advertising. I support them in turning their insights and persona-driven stuff into, how do we translate into an advert? We work closely together to make sure we're translating that into copy, into imagery, to concepts and so forth. But also what I'm big on at Reflect is testing, particularly website testing, but also testing paid media, A/B testing, split testing, and basically holding ourselves to account, because as Max said, and Alex said as well, we want to be confident, we are confident in the data, but then we also want to be able to show you, and we want you to be able to show your bosses or your, the CEO, whoever, to show that person, look, I went away, I worked with these guys, they gave us this insight and I turned it into money in your pocket, or to inquiries, into phone calls, whatever it is. And so that's going to be like kind of take over and kind of understood on websites. So here's a little example of how we sort of did that. Just one homepage, one little test to copy, and the results we got. So in this testing, the data and behavior insight came back, was about saying that customers are very cost sensitive in this area. This is a non-lawyer-based divorce process, essentially. But they're also, so customers, the data said they're cost sensitive. People were happy to save money. They wanted to save money. Divorce is a very expensive process, but as a result, because it's also a very important one and one you want to get right, it's about your entire future. People are also conversely worried about going for a cheaper option in case, what if they let me down? What if I may save money now in the services, but then what if I end up getting I get only 40%, not 50% of the house, etc., etc. That's actually not a cost benefit to me. So people kind of both after cost savings and nervous about why it's cheaper. And as a result, that nervous quality of service came out the back of that. So also using like social proof as a powerful motivator for uncertainty is what they want to see other people who said, oh, I've used this, I built confidence from that. So as it says there, it's a paradox of choice as well. So what we did was we turned that insight into the original homepage message here. We did this just purely for a paid media campaign. Changed their homepage, I personalized it for them using a tool I've got at Reefer Digital. We took the original copy that said it was very much based on quality. It was hitting that kind of quality of service, being #1 online rated online service. But it didn't do so much to sort of talk about the cost saving bits. So we workshopped some copy that tried to hit a bit of each, so we've got that save thousands legal fees for the UK's number one major divorce service. Further down that page, we added some more social proof. We have some quotes from two partners who worked together divorce to say it worked great. It wasn't not acrimonious at all. What I do with my tool is to measure the conversion rate on those two different versions of that homepage. I sent 50% of paid media that was going to the homepage to the original, 50% to this variation. And as you can see in that table at the bottom, the conversion rate to book a 15-minute conversation, a call with them, went from 2.02% for the original versus to 3.74% for the variation. That's the increase of 84.9%, which is almost double-ish. And also, crucially, there, the improvement there was at 99% significance. So that is, if you look in statistics, that's kind of your p-value. The tool will tell me as well how confident it is in saying, actually, this is verifiably why it's not just it's improved 85%, but it may be its chance. The tool will sit there and use either Bayesian methods or frequentist methods to say to me, actually, that is statistically, you do this to test again 100,000 times, you'll get 84.9% improvement every time, or thereabouts, within a confidence window. So this is a great way for us to test it and prove to you guys that actually this does work when we do it. And when it's put out there into the real world, you're going to make more money, you're going to get more inquiries, you're going to get better brand value, all that kind of stuff. And it's just when we do that also to show you, also we can then pick up on, there's another benefit of it, if it's not working as well as we thought, we pick it up very, very quickly. A week in, 2 weeks in, we say, our copy doesn't quite resonate, let's tweak this, let's do that. We can be much more agile about it as well to make sure we're getting those numbers that you'd expect. So yeah, I'm just showing you this to show you how we kind of make sure we translate to the real world, but also how we kind of close that loop and say, look, you spent some money on this research, you've got this data, but now look, and that 85% increase, you can set live, and it's not just for this month, next month, you can set it live for 3 years and keep rolling in that 85% increase in conversion rate. And that's me.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, and some of you might be thinking, 2% going up to 3.74%, is that a lot? It doesn't seem like a lot, but if hundreds of thousands of people are hitting your website every year, that actually changes into a really, really large number and quite a substantial amount of money. So it's really important to get these things right and know the basis and know the research if necessary, get the insights if necessary, to guide you, because as we've seen with other sort of companies, especially ones in social media, you get things wrong, often quite topical themes and topics, it can really backfire. So it's super important that you're understanding the data and the right trends and the right insights in order to inform you on the best way to put your next foot forward. And
really quickly add to that, actually, just to show the value of an increased conversion rate, is also to think about it, to get that same number of conversions without changing that page, without changing the bottom end of the funnel, we'd have to actually drive 85% more people to that page. So if you think about how much you're spending on paid media, say it's £100,000 a year, top of my head, you'd then have to spend, in theory, £185,000 a year just to get that exact same number of click rates that just changing that homepage did. So, and that, you know, that's to show you the value of, if you think of it, that if you change the funnel, that's what we think about what the value really is.
Yeah, cheers, Tom. So this is one example of turning kind of insights into action, but we've done it with a number of clients as well, where our data-driven research, data-driven insights at different scales. We've done some really small projects, just quick, you know, looking at what's going on, to quite large ones, in order to help clients with particular problems. And I'll touch on this finally at the moment. I shouldn't say experiment. We're not doing an experiment, don't worry. So where have we done it in the real world? We've helped Citrix not too long ago, when everyone was kind of working from home. They had a challenge. They said, we're thinking about doing a marketing campaign. We want to understand what employees and what employers are saying about working and work culture whilst working from home. Difficulty is, because it was peak pandemic, you can't really interview people, can't get a focus group going. So we said to them, we can do this. We can look at online conversations and online discourse to try and understand what people are saying around, you know, what employees are saying about working from home and what employers are saying about working from home. And we found some really interesting insights for them around culture, productivity, stress, which they then could feed into their marketing campaign and their particular targeted strategy around that, with the main intention to better resonate with some of their target clients and customers. We've also worked with Superdry as well quite recently. So we've, as Alex touched on, we've done some data-driven persona work there, and that was really in order to inform a bit more about shopping personas and different types of people and how they interact, especially how they might shop online. And quite uniquely there, we really focused on how we can take these insights and actually enhance UX and UI for them. So what are features, as Alex mentioned, like filtering, which we can learn from the research and learn from what people are saying, and be very confident in that and apply that into design principles to kind of maybe improve that user experience. Another company, well, not a company, a government body, in fact, we've worked with, is the Gambling Commission, as Alex touched on earlier. So they had the interesting challenge and said to us, you know, is there a way, doing what you do in kind of the marketing and digital world, can you help us understand gamblers a bit more, specifically vulnerable gamblers? And we said yes. And the really, really beautiful thing with this project is that, you know, vulnerable gamblers, it's not very nice to talk to other people about your behavior, especially if you might be a bit embarrassed about it or might feel a bit awkward. However, online, there's a lot of forums and Reddit threads, you know, where people will post about the stuff because it's often anonymous. What I will say is any language data we look at online, it's all totally anonymous. You know, we only get it if we can access it, and we only do it completely anonymously. So what we were able to do with the Gambling Commission is analyze what gamblers were talking about, and that we could actually compare, you know, what were they talking about in 2020 versus 2021. We could look at what friends and family were saying about these gamblers compared to the gamblers themselves, and that really revealed some interesting new behaviors, new trends, which have the greater impact to actually guide regulatory policy for them and help the Gambling Commission work with charities to better engage with vulnerable gamblers and help them. And then finally, as you can see, it's a really broad range of clients. I think this shows the kind of agnostic nature of this research. We'll always work with a client and try and define the problem and then choose the right approach to try and help answer that question. We worked with HLP Clearfold, and they're I think the largest manufacturer of plastic boxes in the world even. And they wanted to understand what's the sentiment really around recyclable plastic packaging, because in some cases recyclable plastic packaging is actually better than cardboard paper packaging, but everyone has this kind of really hard aversion to plastic. So we used our methods to try and understand what people are saying, what are the touch points in the year which people really talk about, and we exposed for them that one of them was actually Halloween. Everyone was saying about the plastics were Halloween, but no one was really addressing that. And the greater intention is, and I'm sure Becky can touch on as well, is to use this to tailor into their marketing, but also help them with PR, help them with what channels to use. It filters into all these different channels and just makes everything a bit more easier, a bit more efficient, and helps. We found with the majority of our clients, it just helps them make decisions with confidence and relieves them of taking the guesswork out, I guess. And that's it from us. It has finished a little bit early, but I think everyone's used to webinars and tired of them dragging out. So what we'd like to do is thanks for attending, but also if anyone has any questions, particularly around ideas they've got or challenges they're facing and how this research might or might not work, we'd love to hear them if you have any.
Thank you so much, Max. That was absolutely brilliant. Really, really interesting. I will give everyone a second to think of questions, and I'm going to dive in with the first question to get us warmed up. And then if anyone else has questions, either pop your hand up or stick them in the chat. I'm just checking the chat now. Yeah, there's none in there just yet. So I guess has there been anything really surprising so far of any of the campaigns that you've done? So sorry, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, where actually it was like, wow, we were just literally blind to that and we didn't know, and it just opened up something that hadn't been considered before.
It's difficult because once you've seen the data, you go, oh yeah, that probably would make sense. But how I like to think about it is often 60 to 70% of the time, you'll get findings where you think, you know what, that does make sense. But if I hadn't have seen the data, I wouldn't have backed myself, really. I wouldn't have known it. But then you get the 40 to 30% where on totally unexpected findings. Yeah. And I think normally everyone's quite aware of what's going on. So it's not always that high, but every time there's been unexpected findings. We found with the Gambling Commission, there was, probably unsurprisingly now, because there's been quite a lot of news about it subsequently, but cryptocurrency gamblers were talking about that, and it was really kind of segue getting them into more problem gambling, but also traders getting into gambling as well through that way. We found a lot there. We found with the work with Superdry that filtering was way more important than anyone realized, and a lot of filtering functions on sites, they're not actually up to scratch, and that also, the research there revealed some really interesting kind of new future trends that people are thinking about, which you just wouldn't know. And I think when we try and make decisions without having that wider data and confidence, we're often limited to our own biases and what we think's going on in the world, and that's really our own echo chambers. So what this does is just access a much wider pool. I couldn't name too many off the top of my head. Obviously, some clients we can't mention due to the kind of NDA work that we've got, but yeah, there's always a broad range of findings. Yeah.
Definitely, that's super useful. And the filters has pushed a button with me, because so often they don't work, do they? And I'm definitely in the filterer category. We've got a couple of questions come in. So Zareen, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So my target customers are professionals who don't share their opinions and pain points in forums. Is this a limitation for you, or can you work around this? So that's making me think of a big bank we've worked with. That was a challenge, wasn't it? So I'll let you share on that, Max.
Yeah. Brilliant point. It's yeah, it is very hard. So we've worked with one of the largest banks in the world. We do work with them. I can't say who, but you can probably guess, in the top 4. And their target audience is sort of institutional investors who are working at hedge funds, insurance firms, big banks, dealing with millions and millions of pounds every day. Trading that around the world, and they're not the sort of people who, spam on Twitter or Reddit or whatever. So the challenge with them is looking at where do they talk, and there's often channels in which they might talk, and we can scrape specifically for those sort of keywords which they'll be looking at. However, that's not always possible. So what we've done with them is looked at, okay, what content would they be reading and consuming all the time? And from that, can we infer how, as a result, they'll be thinking about particular things? So for them, we looked at things, forums such as, websites such as FX Markets, The Economist, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, these sorts of places where we know they're reading. And as a result, can we infer how they're going to be thinking? What I will say as well is, with our data-driven personas, we're able to access a really broad range of targeted people who you might not find in the general population. So we'll try and find them. It might be quite difficult, it's very niche, and then we'll survey them and then cluster their data statistically to try and draw insights. So there are definitely workarounds, and before kicking anything off, we would explore that to see, is this possible there.
Great, fantastic. More questions. So Dipian says, thanks for a great session. Sorry, but would you have a business case for clients in the fragrance personal care industry, please? Just trying to think, because I think people do talk a lot about personal care, and like reviews of products and things like that are out there to be able to kind of be trolled online is an interesting one.
Yeah, definitely. This it kind of leads into the other question about specific industries which would benefit most. So I'm going to answer the two of them at the same time. I guess anything kind of fast moving consumer goods, where there's constantly evolving trends and habits, it does lend itself quite well to that, because companies need to understand what's going on, and that's often changing quite a lot. I think in the fragrance personal space, it would definitely work, because people love to talk about how these sort of things online quite a lot on Twitter, and Trustpilot as well. People like leaving reviews. We can also, I didn't mention this, we can look at competitor sites and how they're communicating and aggregate that content to see, actually, we're saying these types of words, but all of our competitors are talking in this way. Can we refine that to optimize, basically?
Brilliant, fantastic. And then Emma's asked, are there all-in-one tools that you can suggest to interrogate the data and help inform data-led narratives?
That's a tricky one. There are your standard sort of social listening tools out there, such as Pulsar and Meltwater. But what we do is we take a range of methods and have our own methods we've built internally. And we use that combination quite agnostically to try and solve the problems. And that can be quite robust, such as calling APIs and scraping the data quite manually, or using a few tools out there. So anything, if you want to look at kind of data, if you type in sort of data intelligence, data analytics, there'll be standard companies come up, but our difference is that we blend them in our way to get the most impact.
Perfect. And then Zoe's asked, yeah, I'd assume this sort of research could help brands, corporates better understand issues such as diversity, LGBTQ, etc., and help them better understand how to phrase or approach use of language in sensitive topics or messaging.
Yeah, brilliant point. We've seen this a lot, and it's one of the areas where it's super important to get right. I think because it can backfire if you get it wrong. So yeah, we've done work looking at kind of trends over time and seeing how the conversation's slightly shifting to know what words to mention and what words not to mention. We've done a lot of work in the ESG space on this and greenwashing to make sure companies are talking in the right way, not to get shade from the public.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then we've got, again, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Tijen. So I work for a charity. We're investing more in marketing now, but if you could give 3 or 4 basic steps we can take ourselves, none of us are marketing experts, to target our audience more efficiently online, what would they be?
That's a good one. I might need your help answering this one as well, Becky.
Yeah.
I think from our side, you can start off with some quite small research to understand in the first place who that target audience is, and as a result, once you have that kind of rough segmentation, then you can do work. I'll probably pass over to Becky and what Reflect do to try and tailor that messaging and marketing a bit more.
Yeah, and I think the key thing, and Max and Alex have hit on it today in their processes, is actually when we were talking about personas, we didn't once go, oh, it's males between 20 and 30, etc. Like that type of persona is long gone, really, because what we're trying to do is understand motivation. So I suppose the first thing I would say is find a way to try and understand the motivation of your audience. So if you haven't got the money to invest in doing kind of big data research campaigns, just start trying to talk to people and understand what is it that motivates them to get involved, to donate, to whatever it is that you're looking to do. Obviously, remembering that when we ask questions, we do tend to bias them a little bit. They're going to try and answer them how they think you want them to answer them potentially, but trying to think about that and then looking at how you can layer that into the campaigns that you're doing. So thinking about how can you make them more motivation led and more towards the kind of the end goal? So actually for charity type work, sometimes it can come back to quite a selfish driver of actually it's to make me feel good about myself. Like maybe I spend so much time doing lots of other things, but actually the reason I want to give to charity is to kind of feel that I'm doing my part. So it's actually, if that's a motivation, how could we use that in messaging? Maybe not explicitly, but is there some kind of underlying messaging? And then thinking about channels and trying to, I think it's so noisy out there right now. There's so many channels, you've got so many options. So it's trying to work out the priority, because I think especially again, if you're a smaller charity and not with lots of marketing experts in the team, if you try and do everything, you're just going to be spread so thinly. So it's really trying to work out where's the best channel to put our efforts in, where we can reach that audience, get the right kind of messages to them, and just really hone in on that. And then maybe once we've nailed it, we'll layer in some more. But I think that's, yeah, so it's kind of try and understand the motivations and be less worried about who they are, but it's what motivates them. Then really kind of try and master a channel and get the right messaging into it, and make sure you've got data there. So to come back to what Tom was talking about, measurements. So have we got some kind of analytics, or if we're using Facebook or Instagram, have we got their in analytics that we can actually measure the impact? So hopefully that helps as a quick one, but it's it's always a bit tricky.
I think so. The great thing about most charities as well is often people want to help you, so they're a great audience to kind of go to them. And again, it's biased because it's about people who've already come to you, but you can always just start to speak to them and say, like, why did you come to us? How did you find us? And at least you kind of know, as a rule, people you want to sell to are often the ones you've already sold to. So at least you can start with the insight from them, and they're going to be more than your average Amazon customer. I think they'll be more happy to jump on calls with you or answer surveys and so on without too much of a push, because they're aligned with your values, they like the work you do. So that's a decent start as well, part of your audit, I think.
Really good shout. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And then we've had another question in from Mike. Mike, nice to see you here. Thanks, guys. Have you ever matched your cluster analysis against a string analysis? And if so, what did that give the client? That they didn't have before?
Yeah, so I'll jump in on this one. So in answer, we haven't done it explicitly as such like that, Mike. but what we do, and I think by string analysis, are you referring to NLP text analytics? Whenever we do cluster analysis, it's based on data we get from a survey in which we'll ask quantitative behavioral questions and also open text questions. And what we do every time is we do topic modeling as well to answer these questions. So we'll use various methods. You may have heard of TF-IDF or LDA, and we use these methods to try and give a more mathematical model to the open text, and then we ourselves infer that in combination with the data-driven personas and the clusters. So in answer, we haven't done anything explicit combining the two, but every time we do try and apply some sort of analytics to the open text questions as well. So we're not just giving you guys subjective opinions on these text questions. So we always try and add that level of analysis to what we do, yes.
Does that make sense, Mike? I see.
Yeah, it does. I think what I mean, how I would use kind of the term string analysis, I guess, is if you're matching up the different things you've clustered and you've kind of you're kind of de facto segmenting an audience that way. If you then match that up through different pathways to purchase, so that string analysis from different steps people take from being in market to post-purchase, if you're able to kind of identify how the different attributes within a cluster influence that pathway, which I think you did touch on earlier a little bit. I'm just wondering if you've actually ever run or used someone else's kind of proper actual string analysis and used it that way.
I'll just quickly jump in again. So I assume you're referring to basically using our data-driven personas to enhance a user decision journey, right? And look at those touch points and how it all works. Can't quite say who, but we are currently doing exactly that. So yeah, we're really finding it useful to get this model of a persona and then go through those stages, aware, discover, purchase, share, all this life cycle of the user, and think, would that touch point resonate with this user based on data in this context? So we really are getting all these different levels of analysis through that journey, as you suggested. Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome. Cool. So that was the last question in the chat. Has anyone got any other questions? No, doesn't look that way. It's been such an amazing session. We're going to quickly just chuck the feedback link in here because we would love everybody's feedback from today. And we're just going to do 1 quick minute of asking everyone to just quickly fill it in now so that it's done and out the way. And after that, we'll also be able to share with you the More Than Meets the Eye report, the vegan versus plant-based, and we'll share a white paper that we're going to write up from today's session. So if you could click on that link that Chantel sent you and just really quickly give us a quick bit of feedback, and then we can give you some time back in your day. And thank you so much for joining us.